discussion on remote learning. Now, before we get going, let's just hear a brief word from our sponsor, Lexia Learning.
So I know when I taught first grade, it was challenging figuring out, okay, so you're telling me this student is at risk. What does that mean for me in my class on Monday morning?
We know that the Simple View of Reading provides a simplified model for understanding those underlying components of reading skill development. You take that instructional approach and combine it with the ability to personalize instruction, and it will yield results.
Explicit structured literacy instruction addresses deficiencies in decoding and language comprehension.
This highly explicit instruction is not only important for foundational skills such as decoding, but also important for more complex aspects of literacy. We need to be similarly explicit, systematic, and intentional when planning instruction focused on building vocabulary knowledge.
Complex vocabulary and syntax are characteristic of academic texts in all subject areas, especially as students transition from learning to read to reading to learn.
Okay, thank you, Lexia. Now, before we get going, I just wanted to remind everybody some quick news about what's coming up. SANES is putting together a virtual conference in collaboration with our friends at NYSCAPE. On November 22nd, SANES will offer a one-day leadership strand within the larger four-day NYSCAPE virtual conference. Working with the Association for Computers and Technologies in Education, this is sure to be a dynamic virtual event, so watch for additional details coming next week. And then we'll just go over a couple housekeeping items before we get going. First, I would suggest placing your screen in speaker view mode rather than in gallery view mode, so the speaker appears in the large screen. Secondly, everyone has been placed in mute mode, so please use the chat panel throughout the presentation for questions and comments. If time permits, we'll unmute at the end of the program for some live Q&A. Lastly, this presentation is being recorded and will be placed on the SANES website along with any additional resources mentioned today by our panelists, and so you can watch for that. Now I'll turn it over to Karen Bronson, our Director of Professional Learning, to get us started.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're having a good day today. As Catherine, who you'll meet in a minute on our panel, just reminded us from Washington, D.C., the weather is beautiful, at least where most of us are, so we'll focus on that, but we really hope you're having a good day. As always, we come here to SANES Connect around urgent topics and to share resources and insights at a time that really demands that we collaborate more than ever before. So as Michelle said, this is our second part of our two-part series around remote learning. And we think it's fair to say that getting better at remote learning is something that all of you as school leaders are striving to do so that you can support your teachers and other members of your school communities. So in this two-part series, we're exploring what you can do specifically as a school leader to better support remote and hybrid models in your schools, regardless of your own existing expertise or comfort level with technology, and regardless of where your school or district is on the continuum. And as we know, things are simply all over the place. We're all at very, very different places in terms of everything, where we are in our reopenings, where we are in our use of technology, and our expertise and ease with that. So these panels really try to bring all of those kinds of experiences together around some of the big ideas, and particularly around strategies and resources that will be helpful to you and to your school communities. So today in part two, our specific focus is on what you can do as school leaders to help teachers scale this very steep learning curve. We want to look at what teachers are feeling and experiencing now, what they want you to know, maybe what they won't tell you, but they want you to know, and most importantly, what some realistic steps are that you can take to provide the leadership and support that is essential. So we have to really start by thinking about how far we have actually moved from last March. from the initial emergency response, because that's what it was. It was an emergency response. We didn't just launch into remote learning. We provided some emergency response, and we did it very nobly at the time. So now we want to think about, are we actually now, months later, moving toward true or authentic, successful remote and hybrid learning models that are actually engaging and effective for our students? Or are we kind of stuck somewhere between where we started in March and our current time? So we're going to kind of assess where we are now and where we are going together. And I just have a wonderful group of people with me today to help kind of explore that complicated idea with all of us. So please join me in welcoming Jolene DeBrango. Jolene is the Executive Vice President of NYSET. Welcome, Jolene. We're so happy you are here. I've had the pleasure of working with Jolene on several committees. And when I called her up initially about this, we had a good conversation and she said, "Can I be honest?" And I said, "Absolutely, Jolene, that's just what we're looking for." So she's very comfortable being honest today with us.
Thank you, Karen.
And we appreciate it. I want to introduce Catherine Procope. Catherine is the principal of Howard University Middle School of Math and Science in Washington, D.C. And Catherine is also the NASSP National Digital Principal of the Year. So congratulations, Catherine, and thank you so much for your willingness right from the start to be part of this today. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you for asking me, Karen. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. One thing we talked about in our panel was one of the true silver linings of this whole experience that we have lived through is this, and that is that I and others, we can look at an EdWeek issue or something like that, and I can see an article about Catherine's accomplishment in Washington, D.C., and I can see her picture and I can contact her and she's really there. And not only is she really there, she's willing to really come here at the drop of a hat and be in our conversation today in New York State, just like that. So I still think this is miraculous, and it is one of the silver linings that will hopefully stay with us long after things get back to a better place. I want to welcome Dr. Gregory Brown. Greg is the Assistant Director of Curriculum and Instructional Services at Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. And Greg is the winner of our SANES 2019 Leader in Digital Education Award. Congratulations, Greg. And also, Greg is soon, very soon, to be the Deputy Superintendent in Hyde Park. So congratulations again, Greg, on your move to Hyde Park. It's a beautiful place.
Thank you, Karen.
You are so welcome, and thanks for being here. And welcome my good friend and colleague, Dr. Cindy Gallagher, SANES Director of Government Relations. Thank you, Cindy, for being here today. Your perspective always gets right at the heart of the matter of our thinking and our discussion. So thanks so much for being part of this again today. I would like to just remind all of our listeners to post questions or comments through the chat bar during any part of our discussion right from the beginning. And I will be selecting some of those questions and asking the panel as we move along. And then at the end, we're going to leave 10 or 15 minutes just for your questions. And at that point, I will call out to you to articulate your own question if you are still kind of viewing with us. So we try to get in as many questions as we can. Also want to remind you of the tremendous resources that are up on our website. Michelle, maybe you can pull that up for a minute and just show people what they will look like. They will be tagged to the recorded version of this conversation. And as we always say on SANES Connect, the resources are as valuable as the conversation. They have been proven to be the kinds of things people really want and really need from the discussion that we do on our panel. So Greg and Jolene have posted a wealth of resources, and we also have Cindy is going to be sharing an article. If she references it, she'll share it. I'd like you to note for a minute where it says from NYSET, Current Professional Learning for Teachers and School-Related Professionals. You click on that, it's a treasure chest that you will open from Jolene. And another treasure chest is in Greg's resources, where there is, as he said, 2 years of professional learning around technology with regard to remote learning. So please click into those. I just want to point you for a minute to the 2 resources that I am sharing today. These 2 resources are ones that if I was still a teacher in a classroom right now, these are the kinds of things that would help me, that I would want. One of them is on Twitter. It's called Educator Encouragement Project. Just hashtag Educator Encouragement Project. This is great. If you click on this link, there is a teacher, an 8th grade English teacher named Emily. She's talking right to other teachers. It's teachers talking to teachers, telling them what they're doing. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what's working for me. Let me show you. Here's how I'm feeling about what's going on, and here's what I try to keep in mind. It's inspiring, it's useful. I would recommend that all of you share the Educator Encouragement Project with your teachers in your district. And the second one I'm sharing is Effective Instructional Models for a Hybrid Schedule. Great article with nuts and bolts. These are different how-tos for different models. As someone who has not had to actually teach in these models, I could actually read that and get a pretty good idea of things that I could actually do next that would really help me. So those are samples of our resources. They are very, very valuable. Don't miss them, okay? And alrighty, so without further ado, we will get started. And I'm gonna start by asking our panelists what the landscape looks like where they are. And by that, we're gonna particularly hone in on what are teachers experiencing and expressing right now about remote and hybrid models. And what are some of the, we're gonna start with the challenges and then we're gonna move to some actions and solutions. So what are some of the primary challenges that from your seat you are aware of right now? I'm gonna start with Cindy. And Cindy, if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask you to kind of share a perspective from state ed and maybe speak to a minute about the big autonomy shift that really is a very deep one that is happening right now.
Karen, you always start us off with a challenge, and for me to translate state ed is really monumental today.
Oh, you can do it.
Thanks. Even better than having the opportunity to work with Karen in this wonderful panel is seeing so many familiar faces. It is really great to see you all. So one of the main responsibilities that I've had since March is to follow the governor's press conferences and the governor's conference calls. So as you all know, in March and April, when that volume of information was just coming at us, it felt like every minute, one of my survival techniques was literally taking this got crazy, literally taking a screenshot of every PowerPoint slide that he has used since March. I needed to get a new iPhone with a great deal more memory to really be able to do this. But I was looking back at that today, and I was really scrolling through many of those screenshots. And I think, Karen, you said how far we've come. How far we have come on this idea of remote instruction and the monumental changes that it has required. But one of the things that the governor said today really struck me, and I've been thinking about it all day because it resonated with another member's task that was kind of asked of us to do today. And the governor said, well, all of the schools in the red zones have to close or will be closed. And I'm thinking about the word closed. Yes, that was true maybe a year and a half ago. There was a time, remember, when schools being closed was actually schools being closed. If you had a flu outbreak, schools closed. If we had a snow day, schools closed. There were other reasons, and schools literally closed. When he used that word today, it just seems so foreign because we don't close. I think the nomenclature that we use is so important. What we've really done is gone either from hybrid to full remote or in person to some sort of blended or then remote. So I think we really have to start there, that schools aren't closing. And so what we've done is we have really remade schools in a very short time. I want to talk about two current studies, and they're in the chat room, the ones that I'm citing, but basically one that was released yesterday. And I have a feeling that those of us who are watching the Board of Regents meetings as well will see this in their discussion on Monday. But it was a report released by Education Trust, which many of you will recall, is the president and CEO of that company or that non-public entity is John B. King Jr., our former commissioner. And they basically took state ed's data. Now, state ed did a report in September that basically said 67% of schools were on a hybrid model, 18% were full in-person, and 15% were fully remote. They took that data and dug a little deeper. And what they found, or what they reported, was that students from low income backgrounds were 1.7% more likely to be in remote only situations. Likewise, students of color were more likely 1.4 times to be involved with remote only. Another study that I found interesting was by Future Ready Schools, and that was a national study, and it basically showed that I think 16.9 million students in the United States do not have access to high-speed broadband internet. When you dug deeper into that report and checked on the internet, the interactive map, it showed that about 20% of New York State students did not have access to high-speed internet. Okay, so, and in our big four cities, about 82% of the students are being instructed remotely. When you look at that and the implications for administrators, it is huge. It isn't just going from a lesson plan that's in person to a lesson plan that's done remotely someplace. What it has meant for administrators is a complete organizational shift. You now have a staff that is far more autonomous. And what that then translates into is an organizational communication pattern that too has shifted. You go from, I would even venture to say, minimal discussions to siloed exchanges, because that kind of rich connectedness doesn't happen as well. When we were at State Ed recently, it was, they said, well, we had the summer to plan for your instructional mapping. One of the things I'm deeply concerned in this organizational shift is our ability to get through the instructional load. And I think that's where right now, remotely, we really have to be very cautious, especially in light of the new letter from Vice Chancellor Brown about the probability of the 3 through 8s and Regents exams. How do we move through this huge instructional load, knowing that right now, right here, this afternoon, I know of 3 administrators who are making the decision of whether, because our numbers are spiking, whether we have to go remote. That is not an easy decision. And that will be 2 days or 3 days of lost instructional time. It'll be another organizational shift. And it creates this quicksand where you all are operating in a very, very, very flexible situation in organization. So today's conversation, Karen, I think, couldn't be more timely, because you picked the most superb comments, topics, and get one of the best panels together that I've seen in many of our Connect series. So this discussion on how administrators and teachers can both communicate on how to support each other is just critical as we go deeper into this remote instruction phase.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And please make note of the resources that Cindy mentioned that she tagged up in the chat. Students of Color Caught in the Homework Gap, Education Trust Report, Remote Learning Takes Center Stage. Another excellent couple of resources to share with you. With that, I would like to move to Jolene. Jolene, I think it's pretty fair to say that you have a pretty good perspective on what teachers are thinking and feeling and experiencing across New York State. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Karen. And I want to thank SANES for this opportunity. It's wonderful to be able to partner with you in this way. First of all, I think that this group, more than any other group in New York State, is really in a very unique position to support and help our teachers. Our teachers are not okay right now, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. Our teachers have gone above and beyond since March, and their primary concern is always the children, and we need you to take care of these teachers right now, because it's all about relationship building. It's all about, and as Cindy was referencing, it's harder to keep those relationships, to be sure that they're authentic, that you're taking the time to have those conversations in places where the labor management relationship was strong to begin with. That conversation and that care and concern and that feedback loop is there. Where that partnership is not as strong or was not as strong, there needs to be a lot of work to build trust, to build that type of relationship where teachers feel safe telling you what they're really feeling. And again, I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't already know, but veteran teachers over and over again have been telling us, I feel like a brand new teacher. I feel like a first-year teacher. And what they don't want to hear is that they're doing a great job, because teachers are their worst critics. They know they're not doing the type of work, the best practice that they know is essential for student growth and learning right now, because they're still feeling very much like the ground beneath them is always shaking. And so when you think about veteran teachers, teachers that you look to as teacher leaders in your district feeling this way, how do our new teachers feel? And so how can we work with our veteran teachers and our new teachers to kind of partner up? We talked about the art and science of teaching, right? Our veteran teachers, they know what it takes to really reach a child. They know the culture of maybe a community or a school district. The new teacher may have this technology thing down. They may have a lot of tricks and they may know how to use technology in a seamless way, but do they know the culture? Do they know the families? Do they know why that child isn't coming online? So how can we partner our veteran teachers with our newer teachers for that support? But how do we create that space between you as the administrator and the teachers to have real conversations around how they are doing? Because we all know the state education department's plan not only had a component for teachers to attend to the social and emotional well-being of their students, but for districts to attend to the teachers' social and emotional well-being. And how are we really doing that? Because right now it is critical. We're only in October and we are seeing crisis level types of cries for help from our teachers on how to have a work-life balance, how to set up parameters. And to Cindy's point, what do they teach? What can they let go of to make room for that social and emotional learning that needs to happen? The trauma-informed practices, the culturally responsive practices that we know here in New York, in some places, we're just kind of getting up and running. And now we have this technology to deal with and all the curriculum. Nothing's been cut out because, as Cindy said, there's this uncertainty as to what's going to happen to us at the end of the year and these assessments that are still hanging over our heads. So there's a lot there. I don't want to monopolize all the time. We have plenty of time on the panel, but really I'm here kind of begging you all, how do we take care of these teachers so that they have enough in their tank to take care of these kids all the way through June? That's our biggest concern right now at the New York State United Teachers, and we're here to help in any way that we can.
Thank you, Jolene. So thank you for kind of drawing a distinction between what newer teachers may need, what veteran teachers may need and may be feeling. Veteran teachers feeling like, I'm a new teacher again. A lot of the art and the skills that I've really honed don't translate to this remote environment. And I think it's fair to say that principals are feeling the same thing. Principals who have been in our roles for a long time are feeling like we're new because some of the skill sets are so new to us. But the advantage of that relationship building over time really carries over to this experience. So our newer leaders and newer teachers, teachers with students, us with our teachers, are really need to be prioritizing, is what I'm hearing, building those relationships and really establishing some trust to kind of navigate this new landscape together.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Thanks for drawing some of those parallels so nicely for us. Greg, you at Putnam Northern Westchester, you really serve a big region, so you get a great view of what's happening in lots of schools in your region. Do you want to share with us what you're seeing, what some of the challenges are?
Sure. Thank you, Karen, and Jolene. Thank you for kind of setting the stage, because the role that I play at Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES right now is overseeing a consortium of high schools who have been doing blended learning for almost 10 years now. So I say that in that they have had a little bit more runway in getting up to speed on this, and then what you're seeing now, and I was in a meeting this morning where I was reminded again, a building principal had said, you know, the learning technology grant that PNW BOCES facilitated trained my teacher over a 1.5 year period of time before the pandemic. We can't try and do this work in a condensed period of time and do it well. That initiatives that fail happen because we don't give them the time, resources, and energy that we need. And we need to be really careful to make sure that we provide that for our teachers and for our leaders right now. So most of the perspective I'm going to share today comes from 2 different lenses. One, with teachers who have had ongoing training for years pre-pandemic, and then teachers who have been working on this, as Karen and Cindy had mentioned earlier, really in a crisis situation in the spring, and now in a little bit more of an organized way this fall. But I think some of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing is that our traditional schools are not designed, and were never designed, to support blended, hybrid, or online learning. I mean, that's a fact. And when you start to look at the nuances of that, there's really 2 elements that are now being applied to teaching and learning that we've sort of taken for granted before. And that's, you know, the where and the when of learning. The where was always the school, and the when was your schedule, right? We've spent a lot of time talking about the what that we teach, and we've spent quite a bit of time talking about the why of why we teach it. But I think the real challenge for our teachers, and really what our leaders need to focus on in terms of helping our teachers navigate this, is there are now 2 additional components to the what and why of your teaching. There's now the when and where. And we don't have a lot of experience as a profession in navigating that because it's always been set for us. So that's one area that I'm seeing. Our schools that have not been doing blended learning with us in the past are struggling to put those pieces together. The other piece is, I mean, this is a really big learning curve, right? So we always want to embrace like our inner learner, but for our leaders, really embracing our inner learner means that we need to take risks publicly. Jolene had just mentioned that the teachers are struggling, they're not okay. I think our administrators could probably say the same. We're struggling because we're trying to learn this and lead the same way. I remember as a 1st or 2nd year teacher and coach, a fellow coach had admonished me when I picked up the basketball and said, you know, Greg, don't shoot the basketball, because, you know, don't ever do the sport with the kids, because if you're not really good at it, you're going to lose credibility. I think that's like an outmoded way of thinking. And as leaders, we need to be ready to pick up the basketball and miss the shot right along with our teachers. Take risks publicly and then collaborate with others, because, you know, we're all, Karen keeps using the word like 1st year teachers. We're 1st year teachers and leaders right now. So let's embrace it and let's collaborate, and let's look for regular, open, and honest feedback, right? Not things that are shrouded, but let's get to the heart of the matter. Let's admit publicly when we fail at something, so that we fail forward and so that we can learn from our mistakes, make new mistakes, right? I mean, I have 3 young children at home. I get upset when they make a mistake, but not usually the first time, right? It's when they make the same mistake over and over. We need to create cultures where it's okay to fail forward, where it's okay to make a mistake, learn from it, take action around it, and share that mistake publicly so that we save others from having to make the same mistake and try again, right? And I think the last piece that's super important, I know it's enshrined in the reopening plans and in the pieces around SEL, but I think more than anything, we need to show ourselves and others grace right now, more grace than we've given each other in the past. So I just want to like echo and kind of build on the sentiment that Jolene has really well like laid out for us. In terms of what I think teachers need, I think we need to be really careful about over-resourcing our teachers. Like, don't send that email with one more tech tool that can be used, right? I mean, I think we've like crossed the line of how many we can take for, that was probably months ago. So be really careful about over-resourcing your teachers. Less is more in terms of that. And even if our intention is good and we think it's supportive, it can really be overwhelming and lead to additional anxiety. And that's been echoed from the teachers, both in the Learning Technology Grant in OC21, which I oversee, and from like my own children's teachers who've been very candid with me. So kind of leverage the power of space and time for teachers to learn and use and do something with a purpose, right? Pick the right tool for the job. Don't just create your lessons or create your model around the tool. I've heard recently, like, all of our teachers are going to use Jamboard. What I'm not hearing is all of our teachers are going to find ways to collaborate digitally with their students, because Jamboard is one tool for doing that, right? All of our teachers are going to communicate well and frequently with their staff. That doesn't necessarily mean a Zoom call like this. A postcard home, a phone call to a student or a parent means just as much. It's just a different tool. So pick the right tool for the job. And then we got to amplify, just like we say all the time that we want to amplify student voice. Now is an opportunity to amplify our teachers' voices. And we can do that. And what we have seen over and over again with our teachers who have worked with us on designing these courses pre-pandemic and post, is that they feel the most successful and fulfilled when we treat them as designers of their curriculum, not someone who's just delivering it. When there are clear expectations for authentic tasks, when we provide models, and again, less is more, right? So we provide simple models and allow time for revision and give honest feedback. So I'm sure we're gonna have a lot more time to share other things, but those were some of the highlights that I wanted to just make sure that I mentioned now. And I think they're actionable. I think they're all things that we can become more aware of and take action around today.
Thanks. Greg, you used a phrase that the other day that stuck with me, and that is, I think it was fire hose, like in the face.
Yeah.
Okay. Which many teachers and educators can feel like they're getting right now. Just that fire hose of information and demands and resources. And, today it's Jamboard and tomorrow it's Flipgrid, and people are, their hair's on fire. I mean, it really, somehow getting back to that, how are you connecting with your students? How can you, devote more time just to those connections? And, what Jolene said, we want to help our teachers scale down curricular areas, like get rid of the non-essential, but we don't know whether the assessments are going to be in line with that scaling down. And that's another tremendous reason for stress, right? We don't know if the heavens are aligned or not. So, Greg, also the point that Greg just made about modeling, taking risks, and failing at some of them. This is so new. Greg, do you think that messaging is important from school leaders? I mean, actually letting teachers know we're not going to do this perfectly. It's all new. We're going to make mistakes. If you set up that Zoom meeting with parents and it doesn't go perfectly, that's not a negative thing. That's a really good thing that you tried to do that. So I don't know, maybe you can speak to a minute about the importance of messaging in how we try to work with our teachers and give them more confidence with this stuff.
Sure, I think messaging is certainly one piece of it, right? But Jolene had mentioned something about like teachers being told like you're doing a great job, right? But they know like maybe they're not doing their best job. So I would just caution against saying, and I would do more doing, right? So like to your point, you can always open up a meeting and talk with your staff. Like there was an assistant superintendent this morning who was doing a Jamboard exercise with us at a advisory council meeting, and her comment at the end was like, thank you, Greg, for using this tool, because all of my teachers are talking about it and I've never had the time to actually try it. I'm going to try it at my next K-12 administrators meeting and encourage my principals to use it at their faculty meeting. I think that speaks louder than any kind of messaging. You got to back up the message, I guess is what I'm saying. So get out there and try it, do it. It's going to be messy, acknowledge it, be okay with that. I think that also is there's a psychological piece to this about, what we do is directly tied to who we are and then how we feel about ourselves. So teachers, leaders, parents, kids, everybody, they're in this kind of phase right now where, it's a bit of a identity crisis, and knowing that you're not serving all kids in the way that you're accustomed to, or the tool set that you've honed over a career that's made you really successful is not serving you in the same way or getting the same results. I think we need to give everybody permission to do the best job that they can do instead of like worrying about doing the same job or getting the same result as they had before, as long as we're moving forward. So yeah, I think we can model that.
Karen, I know you want to get to Catherine, but if I could just quickly, I think what, Greg, thank you for your comments.
Sure.
I think that Greg's point about, not just saying you're doing a great job, but I do think that our administrators, we need to listen to what the teachers are saying. You need to actively ask them what they need and how you can help. There needs to be that safe space to take those risks. But they have to know that, they have to feel it with actions. You can't just say, oh no, go ahead. And then there be an inconsistency with your actions versus your words. So they have to feel like that space has been created, that it is safe to say what they need, and that the administrator will then, by his or her actions, support them in that way. So that constant feedback loop and really listening, and it's got to be constant, and it's got to be a two-way street. But that safe space has to be created. It all comes back to that relationship building and ensuring that there's safety there when those ideas are shared. And specific feedback for the teacher is really important. We would never tell a teacher that they're providing excellent feedback if they're telling all the kids, oh, you're doing great, nice job. It needs to be specific. I liked how you spoke to your peer when you were helping her with that problem. We have to do the same thing with teachers. We can't just have platitudes. They need real meat on those compliments.
Thank you, Jolene. And we are going to move to Catherine. And I have to say that when I started to speak with Catherine and met her, I was in awe of the title, NASSP Digital Principal of the Year, nationally, okay? So my initial thought is, wow, she must be a genius at technology. And she is. But interestingly, our conversation the other day wasn't very much about technology. It was about just what we are talking about right now. It was about the human stuff. It was about relationships. So at this point, I'm going to ask Catherine to just kind of share with us where you are, what you're seeing, and anything else that you would like to share with us today.
So first of all, Karen, thank you so very much. And thank you to everyone. I am a New Yorker, Brooklyn born and bred. So I'm in Washington, D.C., but once you're from Brooklyn, you are always from Brooklyn. So it is just such an honor to be here. I did tweet to shout out all the principals in New York to wish you a happy National Principals Month. One of the things that's interesting in what Jolene and Greg were discussing, and you asked the question, how are teachers feeling and afraid? And I think that we have to openly say that there's fear, natural fear of COVID, of course. I mean that, and the fact that the decisions around it keep changing. And as school leaders, we don't know what to do. We were talking about what does closing look like. Nobody talked about that. So what to do, how to actually deal with that and keep them safe. The other fear is, just like Jolene and Greg were talking about, teachers who have been teaching for 20, 30 years and absolutely know their stuff have been thrown into something that's totally, what do we do? And that is such an uncomfortable feeling. And it really is, it makes you afraid. Like, I know how to teach, but what I'm doing doesn't feel natural. And that's how teachers are feeling, that uncertainty. And then they're still on the job. So there's still an evaluation coming. There's still standardized tests, we think, because nobody's made a decision about that either. And then let's add the fact that I have children, I have grandchildren, I've got a husband, I've got a grandmother, I've got all of these things also in my house as well, and I still have to do this job. And so Greg said something key. Grace, I heard. And then Jolene talked about something else, is trust. And so from us as school leaders, one, giving them that grace to fail. It's going to happen and it's okay. But also trusting us to help them, and trust that we're not taking notes. Oh, you didn't do that right. Oh, you tried this platform and it didn't work. That's not the space that we have to be in at this point. because just like the teachers, we're in a new space as well. So we've been looking at like scheduling here because teachers have their own children and their own family things that they have to do, and they're teaching at the same time. And so trying to look at how do we provide that support for the teacher to take care of their own family and to take care of the children as well. So we did some kind of scheduling shifts here, looking at we've got lots of people in the building who are not necessarily student facing or teacher facing, but they can be in on a Zoom call, or we actually use WebEx to be there to actually provide some additional supports to the teachers. So as leaders, looking at how can we utilize all of those people who may not actually teach students, but we're all educators because we're in the building. So how can they maybe be in a class to also help a teacher? And also just letting teachers know that it's okay to reinvent yourself. My husband swears I've been 20 people in the last 40 years. So teachers are going to reinvent themselves as well. And it's really okay, because when we come out of this, and we will come out, it's going to be a whole different world. Like Greg said, there'll be more blended learning. I read somewhere that said the snow days have gone away. Oh, well. So we have to let them know that it may look really, really crunchy now, and acknowledge the fear and acknowledge the stress, and let's keep going, and just providing those supports to them. And I'm going to put, I did have a resource too, and I'll put it in the chat so then you can add it. It's a field guide that we use for remote learning, and so I'll make sure that's available as well.
That's great. Oh, by the way, there was a question in the chat. Not all the resources are in the chat. All the resources will be connected to the recorded version on our website, just to kind of clarify that. But so Catherine, everything you've shared is really about putting the accent on people, right? And when it comes to teachers, you have found other ways to support them. You've worked on schedules that allow them to do everything they need to do with their own families as well as their school schedules.
Yes.
And I think you also mentioned you provided some mental health opportunities for them.
Yes. So one of the things that we've got lots of, we think all the time about making sure we address the social emotional needs of our children. And then we forget that teachers have that too. And so we have some counseling services that are outside of our normal benefits that to actually help teachers just have conversations. So we've got coaching sessions that they can just sign into. There's some one-on-one counseling that they have available to them. We actually set up something that's just for the men, because men don't actually talk a lot about how they feel. So we got yeah, Greg, keep smiling. I hit that one, right? So we're actually looking at some counseling that's just specifically for our male teachers, because we want them to stay in the profession. And when we have crises like this is when people run for the hills, and we don't ever want any of that to happen to any of our educators. And so just actually thinking about looking at what kind of social, emotional, professional help can I provide to a teacher that's, no stress, you pick it, and just give you some time to talk to someone else. So we have looked and put that in place.
And as far as your teachers, I think another thing that stuck with us is the difference between focusing on the teaching and focusing on assigning, right? So the real difference between, focusing on the important parts of that instruction to make it worthwhile and engaging, because that helps find some of the students who are not exactly engaged. And I know that a lot of your efforts too, at your middle school down at Howard University, have been reaching out to find students who have been kind of lost in the shuffle here.
And we've had several, it's interesting because when Cindy gave the statistics, I smiled because I said, that's only New York. That's the same thing that's happening here. And we have, and the interesting thing is, this is something else that we learned when we were talking about like not having high-speed internet at home. we found we have teachers that don't have high-speed internet at home. And that's something that we also need to address. And we have with children, and when we don't find families signing on, and it takes a lot of time with those relationships to actually dig in and find out what's actually going on with the families. We found one family living in a van with 5 children, and that was why they didn't log on. We've had families where we've provided technology, and the family sold the technology because they needed food. And so when we go in and look at what's actually happening to the families, and we also have to think about what's happening to the teachers, there's more to it than just, I don't have a device. And as a school, I think what the nation is finding out is that schools and teachers do a whole lot more than just teach content. The relationships that we provide, the supports to the family, from food to a place to stay, someplace after school to be while parents are working, sometimes job help. We do all of those things in the school. We are so full service, it's not even funny. And I think the nation is finding out again how critical we are to the infrastructure. And now we're still doing it in the pandemic. So I think as leaders, as we try and fill all those gaps, we have to recognize the role that teachers play in filling those gaps, because a lot of times it's the relationship with the teacher, with the child, that we find out what's going on. So the teachers fulfilling that relationship, learning how to do the technology, teaching the content, and taking care of their own family. So all of those things are things that we have to consider as leaders as to how we support our teachers.
Thank you. Maybe we can move back to Jolene, and Jolene, maybe you can share with us a couple of examples of good problem solving, just good concrete problem solving that's been done in some districts, and also the importance of surveying to have something to bring to collaborative conversations. So can you share some examples?
Absolutely. So we are big fans of surveys at NYSUT, and I do believe even as an educator, as a teacher, I used to use surveys with my students to get that unvarnished truth from them about how I was doing. So at NYSUT, we have developed a survey, and we worked very, very closely with our staff on making sure that that survey would be a framework for a collaborative conversation between a union president and the school district about how the teachers are doing, how the instructional plan that you've submitted to SED is going, so that you have real data to make decisions about shifting to a different model, right? If you need to. If things are working great, wonderful. If they aren't, then you can see exactly where those points are, those tension points are. In Kenmore out in Western New York, we saw an example of labor management collaboration where we were seeing in-person instruction happening simultaneously with remote instruction. I know you all know how great that's going. And I'm kidding, because it's a disaster in many places, not because of anyone's fault, but it is really not what we're supposed to be doing, because no one really gets what they need when you're being split literally in two. So in Kenmore, they took a look at this together and they decided this was not a model that was working for their community. And so they shifted. Those students who are fully remote will have a fully remote teacher. The students who are in person will have an in-person teacher. Now they have the ability to do that with staffing. Some places they don't have that ability, but it was that labor management partnership working together, listening to one another, going back to what Greg said, treating the teachers as professionals, which we always appreciate because we are professionals, as you all know, because you're all teachers yourself. So having that conversation, that constant feedback loop is really important. If you're interested in our survey, you can speak to the local president in your district. They can get a copy from us. We send it out to them, and they distribute the survey. It comes back. We give them, a report, and then you can have that as a basis for a collaborative conversation. But that constant kind of talking about how to strengthen that communication and using tools to do that, particularly if the labor management partnership isn't strong, starting with something like a survey is really important. And that Kenmore example is one of the few examples we have where people really changed the SED plan to make it work for their community. And SED is stressing that these plans are living, breathing documents. So let's go back and look at what's working and strengthen that and change what's not working for the students and for the staff.
Mhm. So that's a great example of that kind of problem solving that emphasizes too that need for flexibility, right?
Yes.
So the remote teacher may have more students than if he or she was in a classroom. It's not perfect, but it's better than that one teacher feeling, as you said, like he or she is literally split in two and nobody is getting what they need. So that flexibility in problem solving, willing to try to do things a different way for the benefit of everyone, that's really valuable learning. Also, you know, our eye is not only on where we are here today, but you know, we're going to be in a different place, hopefully a better place, 6 months or, you know, over the next course of the next school year. These strategies, like Jolene, everything you mentioned about surveying for collaborative conversations, that's not just a strategy for now when we're still kind of stuck in active pandemic time. I mean, that's a strategy going forward. You know, how you bring voices in, how you collect data. Because another thing I think we're all reading is the data is sorely lacking. I think people are too busy to keep data in the middle of doing it, right? In terms of how these remote and hybrid models are doing, how successful they are. Right now, it's who knows. We don't have time to stop and think and do a lot of, you know, data collection and research. So the surveying piece also very valuable going forward, thinking beyond where we are now.
And utilizing your staff in different ways. We, you know, we're talking about teachers today, but we also at NYSET represent school-related professionals, your teaching assistants and your paraprofessionals. And if you can train them in a different way, if they were a classroom para or a para that their job has kind of shifted and they may not have the same responsibilities, that family and school engagement piece, we feel like this is something that can really unlock a lot of that grace that we need to really get to know families, to really get to know students in a way that you just can't in a pandemic like we used to by having them come in, but you need to go to them. But that is something that we at NYSET, we have training on family and school engagement so that people can use specific strategies to make those connections with families, strengthen those bonds, and you might see an improvement in students coming online, or when they're not coming online, you'll at least understand why and can work on other strategies to engage them. But utilizing your entire school community to learn about family and school engagement, it is a real skill and it is a strategy. That's going to be key moving forward as well.
Thank you. Just note, Catherine, thank you. Catherine just posted the remote learning field guide that they've been using all along. Greg Brown. Greg, thank you for also posting the page with the resources. Let's go back to Greg for a minute. Anything else you'd like to share with us before we go to some questions about strategies that you would like to share with folks?
Sure. I think just drawing from the learning that we've done over the last 10 years, endeavoring to do blended learning, non-pandemic style, I guess like if it all boiled down, we need to remind everybody and ourselves maybe even that good teaching and learning is good teaching and learning. It's still good teaching and learning. It's always been good teaching and learning, right? And there are certain components that we believe foster those things, right? We've talked about relationships. That's the foundation of everything. But making learning relevant, and I think that gets back to what we've been talking about in terms of prioritizing standards, right? There's different ways to consolidate some of that by broadening concepts and looking at essential processes. I don't like talking about just skills or vocabulary, but processes that require certain skills and tier 2 vocabulary. And then look to our local communities and try to solve problems or needs that are in our local communities. So making our learning relevant is super important. Another thing that's kind of a phenomenon right now is, at least for my own children, I've seen, and teachers from the region have reported that, our teachers are feeling like their Google Classroom or other LMS has to have a whole bunch of tasks there for kids to do to justify the time or to demonstrate the learning. And what we're now finding is, well, who's going to grade all of these tasks, right? So if you give a task and you don't grade it, I mean, I don't know about you, but sorry to all of my professors who may have done this, but like if they gave you a reading and then didn't talk about it at class, you might not do the reading next time. So, you know, we have to start teaching and stop tasking. And we got to do it like now, because our teachers are drowning in assignments that they gave, thinking that the assignments are the learning. We know that's not the case. The other danger in giving the assignments as the learning is that it takes the best part of us and our instruction and our relationships out of the equation. So we've got to get back to ways where we can have kids in an authentic way show what they know by providing frequent formative feedback. And that's not grading assignments all the time necessarily. It can be targeted, actionable feedback, go back, revise, resubmit. It can be using workshop models at the elementary and secondary level, which teachers already know how to do really well, but giving them the permission, I guess, to start teaching and stop tasking.
Karen, going forward too, one of the things that we haven't been able to tease out, and this could go on for hours, I know, because the discussion is so rich, but I think going forward, we might also have to differentiate a little bit about remote learning in the elementary grades versus the middle school versus high school program, and how that, and what do we need going forward in each of those areas. I mean, talk about shifts, just talk about early childhood for a moment. We went 2 years ago to questioning every piece about whether young children really benefit from technology, to now an expectation that they are doing it. And we've done that, but I don't know that we've really had a chance yet to really evaluate all of those different educational components.
Cindy, that's such a good point. And I think in the rush to do online, distance, hybrid, blended, whatever configuration you're doing, and they're all have different characteristics. I think there's also a misnomer that you're reminding me that everything now has to take a digital form. Mm-hmm. And that's also not the case, right? So giving students learning experiences, curating resources and learning experiences that may be held in an online platform, but are offline work that they're doing, is really important too. Just because you can type it all up and submit it in Google Classroom doesn't mean a student shouldn't write it out on a piece of paper, take a picture of it, and upload it later for somebody else to put sticky notes on or comments on. So, you know, I think we've kind of like thrown out the analog components of things, and such a good point, especially for our younger students who are developing even just like handwriting skills. If you can't read your handwriting, right, you might lose the point that somebody's trying to communicate. So yeah, I think we got to focus on those analog pieces too.
Yep. You know, Eric Sheninger, I know many of us are familiar with Eric, who literally wrote the book on digital leadership almost 10 years ago now, when many of us, myself, had not heard the term at the time. It was very new. We did a day-long workshop with him then at the time. His whole point was, this is about digital leadership, but it's not about the machinery. It's about the leadership. Sure, the skills to go with it, but in his view, it always comes down to the pedagogy and the leadership, not the machine. And I think that's been borne out in so many ways before the pandemic with districts. We've all heard stories about districts who threw, you know, the Chromebooks and iPads and technology at students and did not get the result that they were looking for because of the mistaken idea that it was all about having the machinery, but not building the relationships, the pedagogy, and everything, the leadership pieces that we're so focused on here today that kind of make it come together. I've been seeing great comments on our chat bar, not as many questions today as actual comments and good sharing. So I would just, let's go back to, let me look for a couple of questions here. How about Donna? Donna, can I ask you to kind of ask a question of Catherine that came up in the chat, if you are still here with us?
Well, I was just wondering if Catherine could give us some more information and feedback about what she thinks about all of the things that have just been said about Greg and from Greg and Jolene, and how she's been dealing with it, or how her district has been dealing with it. It may be a little bit different than what we've been doing. And if she had any more tips or information, I really liked the things that she had to say before. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
So first I'll go back to what Greg was saying. It's so funny that our children love a lot of technical things. However, we actually sent books. We had one of our parents donated a book to us that had a lot to do with social justice and anti-racism, and we had like 300 of them. And so we were like, oh my goodness, what are we gonna do with these books? And so I said, let's send them to the children. So we put them in the mail, and they were so excited. So when they got online to their class, and they're like, we got a book from class. And so we said to them, what would you like to do? And they said, well, we're gonna have a book club. And so the English teachers let it run. And so like we've got, you know, our LMS has all kinds of bells and whistles and things in it, but we found they were so jazzed to get this book in the mail, and they're almost done. And now I'm like, have to get some more because they got so excited by it. The teachers were really excited because they're like, okay, we're going back to old school. We're going to read books. And so it was really, it really worked. And then to what?
Now if you want to back to my natural colors, like you're never going to see me with natural.
Okay. And so what Jolene was saying is that we looked at everybody in the building, and everybody's not student facing, right? But everybody's still getting paid, and everybody wants to do something. And so we're trying to find ways for people to reinvent themselves. So deans have been in classroom. I said, what do you like? So I like math. Okay, cool. You're going to be in with the math teacher, and you're going to help the math teacher. Our lady, the lunch lady now, has been contacting families, because we actually have families come and pick up lunch from us. And so those families that don't pick up lunch, she's been calling and finding out, how are you doing? How's your child doing? And so that's how we've been getting more information about how those families are feeling. And so she's so excited. She says, okay, this is the list, and I've called these today, and she's working with our attendance person. And so everybody, because the pandemic has caused teachers to reinvent themselves, we looked at everybody in the building. We said, okay, what would you like to do to help us move forward? So Jolene nailed this one, that everybody has a part, and we all want to take care of the children. And so just finding ways for each one of them has been really helpful for us.
That's a great example, Catherine. And I think there's a parallel with healthcare providers. There have been articles written about the hospitals that were most successful, that were most burdened during the peak and most successful. Right down the line, they said, we had our folks come out of their comfort zones and do whatever was needed of them. So, you know, having health professionals in all kinds of roles doing new things that they had not been asked to do before, everyone coming together and just kind of opening that up. It's really very much in line with, you know, what you just cited, and what we're seeing as something that we need to be open to, you know, in our own schools and in our own districts.
And you'll be surprised how excited the people who do our custodial work.
Yes.
Many of them are Spanish speaking people, and have been so helpful in contacting families that speak only Spanish at home. And we said, could you call this? Oh, no problem. And so they feel like they're part of the building. They always are, but they feel even more a part of the whole educational process here. So we didn't leave anybody out.
You didn't, that's for sure. Thank you. Any parting thoughts before we're kind of at the hour, so we'll wrap it up. But
I would just love to a little pitch. If you haven't taken a look at our Education Learning Trust, that is one of the things that I oversee at NYSED. It is our professional learning arm. These seminars are open for districts to purchase and have teachers teaching teachers, school-related professionals teaching school-related professionals. We are a certified CTLE provider. You can see the array of things that we do actually offer. And as I talked about that family and school engagement, we have an expert on staff that has been working in this space for years on family and school engagement. She works very closely with the state education department on it. They call on her often when they talk about these strategies. We come in, we work with your school district on how to implement these strategies and have multiple people doing home visits. We go out with you and we practice the home visits and we work on all of those strategies. It's very affordable, oftentimes much more affordable than other types of professional learning, but we really do want to partner with you. If you have a need that you haven't been able to meet, we might be able to help you with that. And just lastly, one specific strategy. When I was a teacher and I had students who were telling me they were overwhelmed, too overwhelmed to do their work, I would often sit with them and ask them to kind of map out their day. Tell me what you're doing when you get home. What does that look like? And they would tell me things that they were doing. And I would try to work with them. I'm like, you don't really need to do this, trying to help the child work smarter, not, harder. I think our teachers would really appreciate it. And I know it's time consuming if you could talk with them about what their schedules really look like, not when they're scheduled for their Zoom or their Google Classroom, but all the way through their day, so that work-life balance that everyone's trying to achieve, they're looking to you to tell them it's okay to stop doing this. It's all right to do that. They have children too. Many of them are parents, and they're looking to you as the leaders to help them create parameters around their workday so that they have enough to come back the next day and be at their best. So thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you so much, Jolene. Okay, so we are at the hour, and I just want to remind people again, Jolene mentioned ELT. Tell us one more time what those letters mean.
Education.
And I don't know, Cindy or Michelle, maybe you want to bring up that slide or slide 17 on ELT one more time. Here we go.
Education and Learning Trust. We have been in the business of professional learning for over 40 years. And we use actual teachers and actual school-related professionals to be our instructors. They go through an intensive 2-week training every single day with our staff. And we have had a lot of success over the years. And again, we have a whole series called Being Prepared Instructionally and Emotionally that is focused specifically on this period of reopening and what we believed our teachers and our school-related professionals would need. We do have a specific focus on ELs and students with disabilities as well. So please check it out. We're happy to work with you and help in any way that we can.
That's great. And so this slide deck is an example of one of the resources that is available to everyone, okay? And if you want to contact this ELT for some of the resources that Jolene mentioned, you can see how to do it there. Once again, go back to the resources. I had mentioned the Educator Encouragement Project, hashtag there. That 8th grade teacher as a sample, we talked about scaling down curriculum to power standards. She shows other teachers, here's what I did, here's how we did it. This is what it looked like. I mean, it's some of the best kind of learning that I think your teachers would appreciate. So once again, those resources are great, but the best resources are these people who come to these panels, both you who are listening out there and tuned in today, and our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much, Greg and Cindy and Jolene and Catherine. We become friends on these panels, which means, Catherine, we're going to have you back again, okay? Because you can get here from Washington, D.C. just like that right now. And Jolene, thanks so much for being here from NYSUT. NYSUT is coming back for the next 2 panels. We are focusing on October 29th and November 12th on school-related anxiety, okay, for school leaders and for teachers, and most importantly, what we can do about it. And NYSUT is going to help us with that on those 2 panels. So thank you so much. Thank you, Greg, for sharing from all of those regions that you get to be involved with. Thank you, Cindy, for your perspective once again. And you are the state ed whisperer for us. So you did such a
God help us all.
Unraveling all that stuff. And thank you everyone for listening today. Just have a wonderful evening. Keep connecting, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care. Have a great night. Thanks again.